In de naam van de Almachtige God, de Barmhartige, de Genadevolle. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, beste kijkers. Welkom bij de eerste editie van de Noor Podcast. Een leerzame, educatieve podcast over alledaagse zaken met bijzondere gasten in Nederland en in het buitenland. Vandaag hebben we een gast uit het buitenland, dus zal ik inshallah de podcast in het Engels vervolgen. Welcome dear viewers. We have a special guest today, a guest from abroad, a speaker, scholar, a teacher, mentor, a community leader, and an inspiration to many in the West. Welcome, Sayed Mohammed Baqer al Qazwini. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A pleasure to have you here among us. It's been a long time since we met. I think 2015 was the last time you honored us with your visit. And I hope in the near future we meet many more times, but not as long as the last time.
Inshallah. It has been a while, but I'm very happy to be with you again in this wonderful community. And it's my honor to participate in the Noor Podcast in our first episode.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And what better to begin than with you, Sayyidina, a great guest and inshallah, a very beneficial and educative podcast. Inshallah. Inshallah. Sayyidina, just tell us, where have you come from? You have made some changes in your life recently. You lived in the US for a couple of years and now you moved to Najaf. How is the transition going?
About 5 months ago, I moved to the holy city of Najaf with my family, with my wife and 5 children. The transition was not an easy transition, but it has been a beautiful transition. To experience the spirituality of the city of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to immerse yourself in the history of the city that goes back to more than 1,000 years. My family has fallen in love with the city. My children love it. Every once in a while, I ask them, Baba, do you want us to go back? Should we move? No, let's stay here. We love this city. So it has been a beautiful experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. With no doubt, how can you not enjoy being next to Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salam? And you have your children now in the Middle East, in Iraq, near Amir al-Mu'mineen, but you yourself grew up in the US, of course, and you come from a very religious and scholarly family, alhamdulillah. You have a great religiously scholarly background. Your grandfather is an Islamic leader, a jurist, a great speaker in Karbala, Sayyed Mohammed al Qazwini. You have your father, Sayyed Hassan al Qazwini, a great imam and community leader in the US. And what many don't know, also from your maternal side, you come from a scholarly family. You are the grandson, a maternal grandson of Sayyid Muhammad al-Shirazi. So I can imagine, how is it growing up in an environment full of scholars, full of people who dedicated their lives to the deen, to the Islam?
It was truly a very unique experience for me to always be surrounded with scholars who every day were increasing their Islamic knowledge, who every day they had one mission. What does God want from me and how can I serve the Ahlul Bayt? Having them as role models in my life, seeing how much they sacrificed, seeing how much they helped the people, I would see the difference they would make in people's lives on a daily basis. That truly inspired me. And on a daily basis, I would be exposed to all that knowledge as well. Imagine growing up and your father taking you to, let's say, a majlis, a program, a gathering, a lecture, or just people calling, asking religious questions. You are a child, maybe you're not absorbing everything, you're not paying attention, but in your subconscious, you're building a database. And sometimes, when I'm answering some questions, some people tell me, where did you get these answers from? Did you study them in the last 2-3 years? Well, yes, when I studied at the seminary, I gained a lot of knowledge, but a lot of it was data that was stored since my childhood. So it was just truly fascinating to see my entire family dedicating themselves for the path of God, serving the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Yes, I probably didn't grow up like an average child would grow up in a family that is not of scholarly origins. Because when you come from a scholarly family, obviously there are some limitations, restrictions, there might be different, unique experiences. But those experiences were experiences that I truly enjoyed. And they continue to inspire me until this day.
Ahsan. It must be a great blessing to grow up in a family with such spirituality among itself and great responsibilities. But growing up in this environment, did you feel any pressure growing up? You said limitations, you have to behave differently from other usual youth, teenagers, youngsters because of the status of your father in the community or your grandfather. Did you feel any pressure among the years?
I will not deny it. Obviously, when you come from such a family, there is some pressure on you. So I was 7 years old when we migrated from Qom, Iran, to the United States. My grandfather was living in Los Angeles. He had established an Islamic school, several mosques. So we migrated there because my father wanted to help him with some of these institutions and projects. I would see other children, and sometimes I did feel the pressure. You know, I would tell myself, maybe this is not appropriate. You're the son of a Sayyid. You're the grandson of a Sayyid. And this carried on into my teenage years. I remember sometimes my friends would tell me, it's a Friday night, let's go to this hookah cafe, okay? It's not haram to go to a hookah cafe as long as you're not doing something haram. But I always felt uncomfortable. And they would tell me, why? Let's go. What's the big deal? I would tell them, I don't feel that it's appropriate, honestly. First of all, you know, it might be a waste of time, right? Secondly, I do come from this family. So there was definitely pressure on me to avoid certain settings, to avoid certain situations. But I wouldn't say that the pressure was negative or that it was excessive. Honestly, there was never a day where I felt stuck, I'm suffocated, I'm in this prison, I can't do what I want. I never really felt that because I understood the environment my family had created was a positive environment, was one that would motivate you to increase your knowledge, to do that which is good, to utilize your time. So I never really felt suffocated or that I was denied the pleasures of this world. I had a very wonderful upbringing and I enjoyed my childhood. So I wouldn't say there was a lot of pressure on me, but there was some pressure, definitely.
Alhamdulillah, but with positive effects.
Positive effects, definitely.
Ahsan. And at what age did the thought of following the route of your great-grandfathers, your father, your uncles, pop in your mind? The thought of going to the Islamic Seminary, going to the Hawza. When did that itch start? And what instigated this itch or thought?
Now, when I was 7, 8, 9, let's say until 12, I did have this very vague idea in my mind that when I would grow up, I would probably become a scholar. But honestly, I never felt pressured to continue this path. For instance, my father never told me that, get yourself ready. You have to continue this path. You have to go to the seminary, to the Hawza, and you have to become an official scholar. He never pressured us. In fact, I do remember when I was going into high school and our counselors are now trying to guide us. What path do you want to take? What major or concentration or field do you want to pursue? I remember my father told me and my brother, Sayed Ahmed, he told us, I will not impose any path on you. If you would like to become a doctor, go and be a doctor, I'll support you. If you'd like to become an engineer, be an engineer. You want to be a professor, whatever you have a passion for, I will support you. So my father never imposed on us to pursue this path. But when did this passion really kick in? I would say I was in my early teenage years, around 12, 13, 14, when I felt heavily inspired by my grandfather, Ayatollah Seyyed Mohammed Baqer al Qazwini, to continue this path. And there was one incident that really touched me the most. And from that day, I was determined to continue this path. Many incidents, but this one really motivated me. My grandfather, due to difficulties with his health and a heart condition that he had. He had an open heart surgery done in the early 2000s, more than 20 years ago. I remember after the surgery, when they brought him home, on some nights, the family asked me to sleep in his room because I was still in California, in my grandfather's house. I wanted to go to the Islamic school that he had established. My father had moved to Michigan, to the Detroit area in Dearborn. There were no Islamic schools there, like high schools or even middle schools at the time. So I preferred to stay with my grandfather. So one night, I slept in his room. Now, the agreement was if he wanted to get up and let's say go to the bathroom or to do the wudu, he'd call me. So I help him get up because he had pain in his chest and he couldn't stand up on his own. So that night, I was asleep. Let's say the Fajr time for the morning prayer is 5 a.m. I felt at 4:30 a.m. he was moving. I woke up and I saw him getting up. I told him, Jiddu, why didn't you call me? I came to sleep here so you would wake me up, so I could help you. What happened? He said, no, I didn't want to disturb you. Then I told him, we still have 30 minutes to Fajr. He didn't say anything. He went. With difficulty, he had pain in his chest. He did wudu, and then he prayed the midnight prayer, Salat al-Layl. And he couldn't do the full ruku and sujood, and I could tell he's still in pain, but he didn't skip Salat al-Layl. That night really changed me. I said, this old man in his 70s, he just had an open heart surgery, and he does not forget his Lord. Where did he study? Where did he get inspired? On that night, I made the determination, I will continue his path. I will pursue this legacy. So that passion to go to the seminary, just grew overnight. Even though it was in the back of my mind, but at that point, I made the decision. I started telling my cousins and my friends, after high school or maybe just a few years of college, I am going to the seminary.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah, what a beautiful story and very inspiring indeed.
I will never forget that night.
To see that, indeed.
That image is just inscribed in my mind.
I can imagine, beautiful. But even with the thought that you wasn't fully grown yet in your mind, you wasn't an adult, you was still 13, 14, to be that determined after seeing that, that's really amazing and inspirational. And you actually answered my second question, when was the 100% thought of going to Hawza? That was 13, 14, very young age.
I would say at that age, yes.
SubhanAllah, very young. And when you become older, of course, you work towards it. You go, inshallah, after finishing college, I definitely go to Hawza. You made that decision. But what was your game plan? Of course, you make a plan of, when I go to Hawza, what will I study? And how will I come out of it? What will be my next goal? What do I want to get in hand and do for my community or do there where I'm in Hawza? What was your game plan and what was the end goal? What had you in mind?
When I graduated from high school, my father asked me not to directly go to the Hawza, to the seminary. He said, why don't you go to college for a year or two? Because it's very important for you to broaden your horizon, to see the academic world, to gain experience in the academic world. And then you can go to the Hawza, you can go to the seminary. So I respected my father's wishes, even though I was in a hurry, in a rush to go to the Hawza. Because some scholars had advised me. They told me, look, as long as you have the passion, come. You might change your view tomorrow. If you go to college and then you seek another path, you may not have the passion to come to the seminary. So as long as you have it, come. I was in a rush to go, but I respected my father's advice. I said, okay, I'll go to college. So I started with English literature, and then I transitioned to sociology. I figured that sociology would be a field that would be beneficial for me. If tomorrow I want to become a scholar, a community leader, it's important for me to have a background in sociology, to better understand how society works, how the forces of society work, how conflict is created in society, and how conflict is resolved. So this is what motivated me to pursue sociology. Now, at the age of 19, I had completed about almost 2 years of college, a year and a half, 2 years of college at Wayne State University and then the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. At the age of 19, that summer, I decided, okay, I am going to the seminary now. I still have that passion, and an opportunity also presented itself for me to get married. So I'm like, I'm going to the seminary and I'm getting married. Just get the full package. So my father was very supportive. So at age 19, I left the US and I went to the city of Qom in order to join the seminary over there. Now my game plan, my objective was to stay in Qom for a good 10 years and to benefit from the religious sciences, from Islamic law, from the tafsir of Quran, the hadith that we have, and to carry the legacy of my family, and to truly know what the Ahlul Bayt taught us. Yes, I had some good background at this time. My grandfather in Los Angeles, he would teach me some private classes. I would listen to his sermons, to his lectures. But I wanted something in depth. I wanted to be able to look at the sources myself and extract the knowledge. Up until that point, I was relying on others to tell me what the Quran says, what the Ahlul Bayt say. I wanted to investigate myself. Why can't I read the Quran and look at the sources to understand it? Why can't I go to the book of Al-Kafi, for instance, and read the text of the hadiths and directly take that knowledge and apply it? So my goal was to go to the seminary for a good 10 years in order to specialize in fiqh and usul, Islamic law and legal theory, but also to know our belief system in depth in order for me to give answers to the questions that our youth have today. Because when I was going to high school and college, I would see my friends, my classmates confused. Some of them were having doubts about the existence of God. Some of them were having doubts about these religious rulings that we have. Who said Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said you should pray this way or fast this way or that the month of Ramadan begins tomorrow or the next day? Who said? Why am I trusting scholars who come 1,000 years after that? I would hear these doubts. And so I wanted to be able to go to the seminary and in a decade, in 10 years, know the depths of our religion so that when I would go back, I would have answers. I could walk them through it and convince them. Because Iman is conviction when you're convinced. You don't force people to believe. Allah states that very clearly in the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 256. La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in faith. And I had seen a lot of my friends and even some distant relatives, the reason why they believed is because their families imposed on them to believe. And they were concerned about disappointing their family.
Yes.
I wanted them to believe because it made sense.
So it's logical.
What's logical and what their heart could accept. So this was my end goal. Spend 10 years there, know your fiqh, know your usul, know your belief system, and come back equipped to face these intellectual challenges.
MashaAllah, Sayyidina, beautiful. And from your story, there are so many lessons to extrapolate. One, even when you're determined, respect the wishes of your elders. Respecting your father is a big blessing and a big lesson to
I wanted to go with his blessing.
With his blessing,
I would not want to go and disappoint him. So it took him a while to it's hard to let go, when you have your children with you and now they're going to a different country. I can understand the difficulty of allowing your children to go. But I wanted him to be comfortable. Because honestly, I could not go there and study and have peace of mind and know that my parents are worried. That's not something I could accept for myself.
Your respect for your elders were above your determination, and that helped you benefit from both sides with gaining experience in the college as well.
Alhamdulillah.
And the game plan was obvious, beautiful. And the second lesson I wanted to extrapolate was marry early, because you will benefit from that as well, as we see Sayyidina now. Did the game plan change over the course? You had a very clear picture, you had a very clear end goal, but did it change when you were in Hawza after 5 years, 6 years? Did you differ from your path or had another end goal in mind?
Now, when I went to the seminary, I did not have any specific expectations. I knew that you're going to a seminary, you're going to see scholars, mujtahids, ayatollahs, people who are really experienced in their field. And I would be studying under them. But I did not have any specific expectations as to how my schedule would be, what my pace would be, what my living standards would be, what would life in Qom and in the seminary would be. And this proved to be very helpful for me. I think one of the challenges that we have in our lives is when we set certain expectations and then the reality hits us, our expectations are not met, we get disappointed. I went to Qom with an open heart. I did not impose any impression, any expectation. You're going there, study. Go and figure out the best schedule. See what's best for you. Don't impose an expectation and then tomorrow you will get disappointed. This was extremely helpful. There are some people who go to the seminary, they might have a bitter experience, either because of the living standards or conditions,
Or because of the high expectations.
or because of the high expectations, or just because of the seminary system. Let's say I'm used to a college system. The seminary system does have an organized system, but it's not like a college. It's different. Now, some people might not be comfortable with that. Well, this is not what I'm used to. Don't go with all these expectations. Go there to serve Allah and Ahlul Bayt. And like you said, if you set the bar sometimes too high, you might end up putting too much pressure on yourself.
Disappointment. Yeah.
So I had in mind to stay there for about 10 years, and I ended up sticking to that. I actually spent about 10 years in the city of Qom. And in 2011, in 2010, 2011, I did decide to go back to the University of Michigan to get my degree. So one day I was sitting with my cousin Sayed Hadi and I told him, we both went to a couple of years of college. We had excellent grades. I mean, why let that go to waste? Let's get the degree. He's like, you think they'll let us in after 6 years? I mean, when you leave your university for 6 years, you have to reapply. Your file is not active anymore. I said, let's call them. What do we have to lose? So I called my school. I spoke to a counselor. I got an appointment. And I told the counselor, I've been away for 6 years. Can I come back and finish? The counselor said, well, that's unusual. Why were you away? What happened? I told the counselor I went overseas. I got married and I enrolled at a seminary. So I am busy still studying. I'm not away from studies. She pulled up my records. She saw my GPA and the score. She's like, okay, you seem like a serious student. I'll reactivate you. Okay. And a few months later, I went to finish the degree. MashaAllah. So there was that 1 year gap over there. But overall, I did spend 10 years in Qom. And that end goal that I had in mind, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me to achieve it.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Great to hear that your Islamic seminary desires didn't stop you from getting a degree in the Western societies and also benefiting from the Islamic seminary and getting your degrees there and your specialism.
What motivated me to also go back to college and finish the degree, so I had spent by that time about 6 years in the seminary. I was getting all the knowledge, all the data, but I realized that the world is changing. In order for you to communicate this data and convey it to this generation, you have to speak their mentality. You have to be familiar with their way of thinking. And honestly, college helped me a lot with that, in formulating your arguments, in being persuasive and convincing, in using even the appropriate terms, in being academic in your approach. That significantly helped me in my career.
And you took the best of both worlds, basically.
Alhamdulillah. So with the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam.
Alhamdulillah. And as you already described, you had a great and very interesting journey of knowledge. You were 19, you went to the Hawza of Qom, you came back, finished your degree in America, and I believe you went back to Qom after finishing your degree.
Yes, so after I got my degree, I went back to Qom.
You went back
and
to
I
Qom.
spent 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years, the years where we met each other. You came to visit us in the Netherlands, and you told me in 2007 that you go back to the US to serve your community there. And how did you serve your community? Alhamdulillah, you established with the help of course, your father and the community there, a great Hawza, al-Hujjah Seminary for everyone interested in Hawza studies in the West. I recommend this great online, also as physical for the US citizens, seminary, which gives you a good glimpse and an insight in how the Hawza life is, in the studies, the sciences you get with one of the teachers and the director, of course, Sayed Mohammed Baqer, Samat al-Sayyid. Very great. I myself enrolled. I'm one of the lazy students, as I always tell the Sayyid.
So, MashaAllah, you've done very well.
Alhamdulillah.
You and your brother, Sayyid Ali.
Alhamdulillah, with your help and the great help of the mentors. But now, after establishing the Hawza and being in the US for several years, you moved 5 months ago to the holy city of Najaf. So you have insights in both of the seminaries. But before we go into that, could you give us a little bit more insight in the history of both of the seminaries, what they went through to the decades and how they developed to the state they are now in?
The Shias have had multiple seminaries throughout history, but the two main seminaries are the Seminary of Qom and the Seminary of Najaf. The Seminary of Qom is actually a recent seminary. It is probably the most recent Shia seminary, even though it's the biggest seminary and the largest seminary, but it is the most recent. The city of Qom itself is a very important city with historical significance. We find in the 2nd century Hijrah. So we're looking about at 150 years after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, at the time of al-Imam al-Kadhim, al-Imam al-Rida, al-Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, al-Imam al-Hadi al-Askari, that period, we see a wave of the followers of Ahl al-Bayt migrating to the city of Qom. Especially the tribe of the al-Ash'ari al-Qummis. They were later known by al-Ash'ari al-Qummis. They were great scholars who studied in various places of the Muslim world, but then they migrated to Qom, and Qom became the hub of the followers of Ahl al-Bayt. And that continued for a few centuries until the 5th century. With the rise of other schools like the Baghdad school, the Ray school, and then with the Mongolian invasion of Qom, they decimated the seminary. So in year 621, they completely destroyed the seminary. So we're talking about the 7th century Hijrah, 621 Hijrah. And then what happens is, only a century ago, in the year 1921, a great scholar and mujtahid by the name of Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Ha'iri, he migrates to Qom. And in year 1923, exactly a century ago, this is the 100th anniversary of the Seminary of Qom, he establishes the Seminary of Qom. So from the 5th, 6th century until a century ago, there was really no seminary activity in Qom. He revived the seminary. And the seminary grew to be the largest seminary right now, with close to 100,000 students who are studying in the Hawza of Qom. And they are studying, various sciences,
from all over the world.
From all over the world. The amount of fields that you find in Qom right now is truly mesmerizing. It's amazing. Not only do you have the traditional sciences, for instance, Arabic grammar, Arabic morphology, the tafsir of the Quran, Islamic law, fiqh, usul. These are the traditional sciences. Today you find many branches of philosophy being taught in the Seminary of Qom. You find world religions being taught in the seminaries. You find psychology, sociology, anthropology are being taught in the colleges, the religious colleges of Qom. So Qom today is by far the largest seminary. And I had the honor of spending about 10 years in the seminary and to benefit from it. Now, why did I now choose to go to Najaf? Well, historically, the more important seminary is the Seminary of Najaf. The history of Najaf goes back to the era of Sheikh al-Tusi. We're looking at the 5th century Hijrah, so roughly 1,000 years ago. Before Sheikh al-Tusi, You did have a seminary in Najaf, but it was a very small seminary. When a Shaykh al-Tusi moves to Najaf from Baghdad, that's when the seminary grows to be the most important Shia seminary in our history. And it was the sectarian divisions that caused him to move. He did not want to move, he was in the capital. But what happened is you had the Salajiqa Turks who invaded Baghdad, and they were very sectarian. The very house of a Shaykh al-Tusi was burned down. His books were confiscated. The chair, his library, the chair on which he used to sit to teach was burned. So he had no choice but to leave. He, along with tens and hundreds of his students, they moved to Najaf. And when Shaykh al-Tusi, that pillar, moved to Najaf, you had the birth of this amazing seminary. And since that day until today, there has been never a break in the Hawza in Najaf. It has been producing scholars for 1,000 years. You have religious classes in this seminary for 1,000 years. Now in 1967, before the Ba'athists took control of Iraq with their unjust policies, you had 16,000 students in Najaf. And so Najaf was really rivaling Qom in terms of the number of students and scholars and mujtahids in it. But when the Ba'athists came to power, they killed so many scholars. They exiled so many scholars. And so they almost decimated the seminary, such that in 1991, you only had 500 students left. So 1967, how many? 16,000. 1991, only 500.
Wow.
But after the collapse of the Ba'athist regime and the collapse of Saddam, the seminary of Najaf has picking up speed. It's now back on its feet. Currently, you have over 16,000 students in the city of Najaf studying. So I wanted to experience that. I wanted to see what this Hawza has to offer, the scholars, their method of teaching, because it's distinct and a little bit different than the method of teaching of Qom. So I wanted to experience that as well. And that's what motivated me to move to Najaf.
Beautiful, beautiful. And of course, you come from a scholarly descent, from a scholarly background that gives you a heads up in comparison to other young brothers and sisters who want to go and seek the journey of knowledge. But would you say, could you even start this path, this route, going to the seminary, starting as a layman, only knowing your wajibat? Or would you recommend to build a foundation within yourself and have some knowledge prior to going to Hawza?
You don't have to come from a scholarly family to be able to go to the seminary. Definitely, coming from a scholarly family facilitates it for you. It gives you a sense of direction, or it gives you a head start. But most of the students in the seminary today, when I tell you that Najaf today has 16,000 students, or Qom has 70,000, 100,000 students, most of them don't come from scholarly backgrounds. They come from layman families. So keep that in mind, that most of the students there, they are not from scholarly families. Yet they found their way, and the seminaries have welcomed them, and many of them are excelling. You don't have to have any background to join the seminary. So we find students who come, they have the passion to learn, but they really don't know their Islamic law, they don't know their basics. Even some of them don't even speak Arabic. There are people who come to the seminary, they have to learn Arabic. A lot of students go to the Hawza of Qom. They learn Farsi from scratch. So many of the students, they do not come with any background. Therefore, I say to the youth of our generation, if you have the passion to go, and you don't see yourself having any background in religion, don't let that stop you from going. You can go and start to build your foundation step by step. There are introductory classes in the Hawza. When you go to the seminary, you will learn Arabic grammar. You will learn sarf, Arabic morphology, at a very basic level. It takes time, so you need to be patient. Don't think you'll go to the seminary 2-3 years and you're going to become an Ayatollah. It's a difficult path, but it's a path that pays off. So I would say that you don't have to have any background in order to go to the seminary. But if you do, obviously it will facilitate it for you. And it will give you a head start. So I do recommend for those who are considering going to the Hawza, and let's say you're planning to go in a couple of years. In the next couple of years, do build some foundation. Understand fiqh, try to learn Arabic, get an overview of our belief system, of the Quran. That will give you a very good head start once you go to the seminary.
Ahsant, ahsant. Sayyidina, as someone who spent more than a decade of his life at the seminary, at the Islamic seminary, in what way has it shaped and formed you? In addition to knowledge, of course, what you gained throughout the years, what did you gain from your years in the Hawza? And would you recommend it to anyone or only to people who want to be religious leaders eventually, or even teachers in their community?
We have, Sayyid Sajjad, we have two types of knowledge. You have the informational text knowledge.
Yes.
Let's call it the lexical knowledge. The books that you read. Obviously, the seminary gives you that. And then you have the experimental knowledge. The knowledge that you experiment with. The knowledge that shapes you. Some people want to even call it the spiritual knowledge or moral knowledge or ethical knowledge. What I truly gained in the seminary during my time there, in addition to the sciences that we studied, is my perspective and outlook on life, how to be a better human being, how to uphold moral qualities, and how to prepare for the day of judgment. One beautiful lesson I learned was humbleness. I would see scholars who knew 100 times more than I knew. They were top scholars, mujtahids, but they were so humble. Their knowledge humbled them. And I could see it, the more they knew, they would know and they would grow in their knowledge, the more humble they would become. That inspired me. That taught me that true knowledge is not just facts that you gather in your mind. It's not just data that you store in your brain. Knowledge is what you implement. It humbles your heart. It washes your heart from arrogance, from jealousy, from ego. So I would say the most beautiful lesson I learned in the seminary is how to let go of your ego, how to control your ego, how to control the nafs and tame the nafs. And I had wonderful scholars who truly inspired me in this path. How can you become a decent human being who truly cares, who genuinely cares, who has compassion, who has not only sympathy but empathy? I would see some of the scholars over there. Sometimes you could tell that they're disturbed. You know, I'd investigate what happened, did someone bother you? And then I would come to the conclusion that, the scholar was upset because, he had an encounter with a poor person and he felt bad for the poor person. Or a natural disaster happened somewhere and he felt, he would try to empathize with the victims. That truly inspired me. This is something that I gained in the seminary. That amazing spirituality.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I have a certain image in my mind of people who are going to Hawza, the Hawza students, the Hawza lifestyle. Like, it's for me in my head, maybe I'm biased, it's going to class, going to the mosque, going to ziyarah, praying, doing ibadah, spending your nights in ibadah, back to home, sleeping, next day, just reliving the same days and the same activities, like going to mosque, the class. Are there any after school activities? Are there any fun activities besides going to the classes and the mosques and spending your life gaining knowledge?
Some people, when they think of the Hawza, they think it's this really boring place where you have a bunch of nerds studying all day and then doing ibadah all night. That's not the case. That is not the seminary. Yeah. You do have people who are committed to knowledge and ibadah 24/7, so to speak. But that is not representative of the seminary. The seminary life is one that's fulfilling and it's also entertaining. For instance, I'll share with you my personal experiences. Yeah. When I studied in Qom, there were days when I would gather with my classmates or with some of my relatives and other students and would play sports together. And the common sport obviously is football, or in America we call it soccer. You would find those talaba, as they call them, the seekers of knowledge or the students of the Hawza, they would play sports. It's very common. Yes, you don't really play outside such that they're visible,
Yeah.
because they may not be comfortable, we would play in a place that would be indoor, in an enclosed place.
Yes.
But we would have our fun time. Another activity that a lot of the seminary students would do, sometimes they would go hiking. You know, Qom has a lot of hills and mountains around
yes,
it.
yes.
And one popular place was Kuha Khizr. You're
Yeah.
familiar with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Many times they would go either before the morning prayer or after the morning prayer, where it's still quiet and you know, you don't have too much activity. They would go there for an hour hike and they would really enjoy it.
Right, yeah.
Tea time, that's very common, you know, in the evenings or sometimes late afternoons, we'd get together in someone's house or in an appropriate cafe if there is one, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there are some appropriate cafes.
Definitely.
And we just have coffee time or tea time.
Yeah.
Coffee now has become a little bit more
Popular,
but not 15 years ago when I
No
went to the
Starbucks in the
seminary. No, there's no Starbucks. But you can find coffee.
Yeah, yeah.
But generally speaking, students of knowledge and scholars, they favor tea, black tea.
Yeah, of course.
So it's very common for us to sit and just talk. You know, just the discussions that we have are very enjoyable.
Yeah.
We discuss everything you can think of. One of the beautiful lessons I learned in Qom and in any other seminary like Najaf is that there is not a question that you're not allowed to ask. Ask. You could be sitting next to an Ayatollah. Ask him any question. Even if it sounds strange, you know, ask him, what's the proof that God exists? Ask an Ayatollah. He's not going to tell, come on, is that a question that you asked me? I'm looking for new proofs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And any other question like that. So sometimes we're sitting with seminary students, we discuss the economy, we discuss political affairs that are going on around the world. We discuss new things that are arising, right? Just one recent discussion I had in the seminary was lab-grown meat. Today, you have lab-grown meat, and I think the FDA in the US is approving of it. Next time you're buying meat, it may not be real meat in the sense that an animal was prepared. No, they grew that in the lab. So, like, I'll read an article like that, or one of the seminary students will read an article like that, and then we have our tea time. Okay, today let's discuss this. Is this halal? Is it haram? What's the evidence? How can we say that this meat is halal, right? What are the proofs? So we'll go through the books, through the hadiths, trying to come up with, you know, the basics that we have in fiqh to understand that. And you'll see the seminary students enjoying that, genuinely enjoying that. When Bitcoin and cryptocurrency came, that was a common discussion we'd have. Is this halal? Is it haram? What kind of a transaction is this? Is this real currency? Is this symbolic currency? What's the difference between them? Did Islam make a difference between them? These are interesting discussions. It doesn't mean you're sitting there and just discussing very boring material. Not at all. I would really enjoy a lot of these discussions. So a lot of seminary students, in addition to their academic studies in the Hawza, and in addition to the spirituality of visiting, you know, the shrine of Lady Ma'suma in Qom, or the shrine of Imam Ali alayhi salam in Najaf, they do have an enriching life where they spend quality time with each other. And one thing I would like to point out here is that today when psychologists are looking at what makes people happy, one of the most important factors is the support system of friends that you have around you. We have that in the seminary. I have so many friends in the seminary. If I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling depressed, they could say something to me that would uplift me. They're there for me.
Beautiful.
And that is something beautiful at the seminary. So don't get the image that you're going to this boring place that's only appropriate for nerds.
Yeah.
No, that's far from the truth.
Ahsant. So you can be a nerd and enjoy your time as well.
Absolutely.
In the seminary. 2 more questions for this first part, inshallah. For a young brother, sister from the West, you already told us, go with 0 expectations, you will benefit a lot from it. But for a young brother and sister from the West who is used to a certain living standard, a certain comfortability, what struggles and limitations do they have to be prepared for? Because you have the knowledge and the experience of both Islamic seminaries as well as Qom as Najaf. what struggles and limitations do you face there to be prepared as a Western young sister or brother who is seeking to go to one of the seminaries?
When we go to the seminary, we are going willing to sacrifice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates you when you sacrifice. So from the first day, tell yourself, I'm not going there to enjoy myself. I'm going there because I have a mission. And that mission is to gain knowledge, to better myself, and to better my society. That requires sacrifice. Just like when you go to a very important college or university. We call them the Ivy Leagues in the US. Let's say you want to go to Harvard or Oxford, for instance, or any important university around here. You think it's going to be an easy way? You have to sacrifice. So going to the seminary means that you have to sacrifice. The living standards, therefore, are somewhat different than what you're accustomed to over here, especially in Najaf. When you go to the city of Najaf, you will see that the city might lack some basic infrastructure. For instance, electricity. I remember when we moved 5 months ago, in the heat of the day, when temperatures approach 50 degrees Celsius, right? Imagine in that heat, and there is no electricity for 10 hours a day. Sometimes 12 hours a day. Sometimes 15 hours a day. When there's a lot of pressure on the grid. You have to be prepared that millions of people live in these areas. And I'm just one of them. It's okay. I'll make it. I'm not maybe too comfortable right now because I'm sweating, but this is building me. It's making me a stronger person. Or in the winter when it rains in Najaf, the whole city becomes mud. So that type of living standard is different than what you're accustomed to over here. But it's not that bad. At the end of the day, we're living, in apartments or schools or dorms for a lot of the students. Alhamdulillah, electricity comes and goes, but you still have electricity. You'll go to your class. Food is always available. You'll never go hungry. So just look at the basics of life, the basic necessities, and you will enjoy life more. Many studies have shown that when you start to indulge more than what you actually need, your life satisfaction goes down. Over there in the seminary, you start to appreciate what Allah has given you. Now in Qom, it's much better. When you go to Qom, the city has proper infrastructure. It's a lot cleaner. You have electricity 24/7. So honestly, for students now who are going to the city of Qom, the seminary, you will not see a marked difference. Yes, you'll see some cultural differences, for instance, right?
Living standards.
But living standards are pretty similar.
Yes, okay. Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Sayyidina. Last question to finish this section. We in the Netherlands, as followers of the Quran and Ahlul Bayt, as Shia Muslim community, we have a shortage, not even a shortage, I would even say a lack of Dutch-speaking scholars who spend many years in the Hawza, spend many years in the Islamic seminaries, religious authority who studied at the Hawza. And how can we lay the foundation of sending or even encouraging our youth to go to the Islamic seminaries and gain knowledge and experience, to come back so they could benefit their community, so they could lead religiously their community?
If we want to save our future in these societies, we have to lead ourselves. We cannot wait for leaders to come from outside to lead us. Our youngsters have to go get educated, become specialized in religious sciences in order to give religious and spiritual guidance to their communities. I want people here to see it as a life or death situation. I'm not talking about physical life, I'm talking about spiritual life and religious life. This is an urgent matter that we must consider immediately. We need to motivate our youngsters to go to the seminaries and to come back as scholars who grew up here, who speak the language, who know how to connect to the youth and to give them proper guidance. This is an obligation. Allah on the Day of Judgment, He will hold us accountable. Because in Surah Al-Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there should be a group from, there should be a group from every tribe, from every nation, who go and learn, and then they come back and they warn their people. Ayat al-Nafr, as we call it. فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ. That's how the verse starts in Surah Al-Tawbah. Allah is commanding us that there should be a group of you from your own local area going to the seminary. Now what we need to do is the following. Number one, we have to sponsor them. I'll be honest with you. One of the concerns of a seminarian is, how will I live? Because if I go to the seminary for 5 years, for 10 years, I'm not going to be working.
And you don't get student loans there.
And you don't really get, and even if you get student loans, they're very minimal.
Yeah.
And the stipend, the salary that the seminary gives you is very minimal. You cannot really live on it.
Okay.
Especially coming from the West and you have certain standards. It's really impossible to live on it.
Yeah.
So you need someone to financially support you. And so some youngsters, some youth, they'd like to go, they're like, I don't want to burden my mom, my dad, they're not going to be supportive. Honestly, one thing we can do as a community is to sponsor them. Those whom Allah has given in this community and you have resources, send 5, 10, 15, 20 of your youth. Tell them, I'll sponsor you. 10 years, how much is it going to cost? We're going to form a team, a committee. We will sponsor you. This is one of the best acts of sadaqah jariyah. You know, people, when it comes to sadaqah jariyah, the donations that people think of, usually you think of sponsoring an orphan, which is great, we should. Usually you think of donating to a masjid, which is great, you should. But how about sponsoring a seminarian? You know, if that person goes to the seminary, he comes back, she comes back, and they guide 1,000 people, Allah will give you the ajr. Allah will say, you sponsored them. So as a first step, let's sponsor them. Let's tell them, don't worry about the financial struggles. We will take care of you because we're investing. This is an investment for the future of our community. Secondly, we have to motivate them by reminding them of how important religious knowledge is. Some people underestimate it. No, if I become a doctor, I'll be more prestigious. If I become a professor, if I become an engineer, if I become this or that, people will have more respect for me. I'll have more influence in my community. We have to show them that this is a wrong mentality. So any person who goes to the seminary and comes back, we have to support them. We have to show them that they're a valuable asset over here. And that what we really need their services, just like we need the services of a doctor. This is a spiritual doctor. An educational, religious doctor. So by showing more importance to the religious sciences, more of our youth will be interested in going. But you have this attitude and mentality in some communities, not all, in some, that someone who wants to go to the Hawza, oh yeah, you know, this person is either a dropout from school, he doesn't want to continue, there's a problem with him, no big deal. But if a person gets accepted at a medical school, everybody claps for them, everybody cheers them.
Unfortunately.
We have to support those who want to go to the seminary. If we take these steps, I think more of our youth will be motivated, inshallah.
Ahsant, inshallah. You already motivated me, Sayyidina. When
Allah
can I get
bless
my
you.
ticket?
Come back with me next week.
Inshallah, inshallah. Thank you very much, dear viewers. Thank you very much, Sayyidina.
Thank you.
This was the first part. Inshallah, we'll be back soon for the second part with Sayyidina. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.